Hello, my dear listeners. This is Astrid from Spiritual Alchemy Show because it's Thursday and it's the appointed time. So I'm really hoping you can hear me clearly. Let me just quickly log in to the RX Radio chat where I'm going to be today taking questions because we're going to have the second part of the show that was on occult and spiritual training, where I was explaining some of the basics of meta. And today we are going to continue with that because something that can be 1 hour long and actually share some really cool information with you. And it's also information that's not necessarily public and it's not necessarily available or easily accessible in many books. I was kind of explaining it in some of the previous shows why it's actually such a lack of literature on basic occult training. Usually it's not a problem to find books about a certain super specific mysteries of old Egypt in one particular era, or millions of different studies on one particular old grimoire book. That's obviously very niche information, and usually that's not that much of a problem to find out, I would say, widely available. But what is harder to find out is a beginner's literature or some sort of like a beginner's guidelines for people to start with metaphysics or hermetic training. There are a few books, but there's not many, and lots of the books that are out there, in many cases, they are written in a coded language. There are quite a lot of information in them to kind of, I would say, mislead the person, in generally for a good reason, to prevent somebody who is not ready to follow this path and eventually harm himself or others. So I'm doing this show where I'm kind of talking openly about some of the information, some of the mysteries that are out there, and in general about information that tend to not be public as much. The reason is because I believe that those who are ready or those who are meant to follow this path will just naturally find their path to this recording or live to this show, and those who are not meant to be just won't. So I do believe in a divine providence and just basically inviting the right people to this radio show. So today I will be throughout the evening I'm going to take questions. If you would like to ask some questions about occult or spiritual development, please join me on ParaX Radio. There's a tiny little thing that says chat, and that's where I am, so that's where you can ask me. So in the last show, just to make like a short little in previous episode, I basically explained that occult development, or let's say development, somebody who wants to be a magician or somebody who wants to be mystic, what is it that they need to do? What's the path that they need to follow? That's usually quite a big question. From zero to hero in this particular field, it's a quite hard path and can be quite long and painful. What I was saying in the previous show is that, long story short, if somebody wants to be a magician, successful magician, the path is that he first perfect himself, becomes something that's like a higher evolutionary order, the divine man. And as a person perfect himself in his own microcosm, he starts expanding, and as a perfected human, he can enter the divine energies and expand the limits of his own humanity or humanness beyond that level, and basically blend or enter the kingdom of heavenly energies. This whole process is not as scary as it looks, especially to expansion into the divine energies. It's the easier part, even though it doesn't sound like it, but truly it is the easier part of the two, where the actual introspection and perfecting oneself within your own physical body, that's the hardest part of the whole process. The rest of it is surprisingly smooth. So what is it when you need to do that? Well, this process is, as I suggested, is happening in two phases. The first phase I'm calling the solarization of a lunar mind. I kind of explained the concept of a solar and lunar mind in the previous show, where solar mind, that's where is your ego, that's where is your consciousness, that's where is your ideas, that's where is your mind. Lunar, that's our subconscious and unconscious. That's the place of our mind when our dreams are made, when there's stored information about how to give a birth to a child, when there's a stored information about how to move a body, where it's storing the information on how to stop your body from decaying within 12 hours because just a piece of meat. All of that information is stored in your lunar mind. So first part of this journey, recognizing, understanding yourself, working with your own microcosm, working within yourself, is the notoriously known know thyself. Understand yourself and perfect yourself. So the first stage is know thyself. Understand yourself. The second stage is perfect yourself. The third stage is expand and work with the perfection outside of you. And the last step of the development is help others to follow your lead or follow your path or to transform themselves. So in these 4 steps, it's basically, I would say, covered what's happening within the mystical or occult or hermetic transformation. So know thyself, or solarization of the lunar mind. When your lunar mind is starting the solarization of the lunar mind, what does it mean? Generally speaking, it means that some sort of unconscious processes within you, as breathing or giving birth or other things that you can, are starting to leak, or we are trying to leak them into the solar mind. We are starting to be aware of those processes, the link between solar mind and lunar mind, which is normally functioning, but it's not something we would be in most cases completely aware of. We don't know that our dreams are somehow in many cases based on our everyday situation. So the information from the consciousness, from the solar mind, is going through that channel, it's leaking down into the lunar mind where the dreams are made. So we know there is a channel between the two of them. Also, our lunar mind is sometimes through that channel communicating back even in our awakened state, which, let's say, can be an intuition. Intuition to jump off the street 1 second before there is a car coming. That's all very quickly communication through our lunar mind that's calling that, let's say, alert to the solar mind, that which is then reacting to it by eventually going off the street. So there is a communication channel between those two minds, but in the first step, know thyself, we are getting to know consciously through our solar mind the lunar part of ourself, our lunar abilities. To what extent do they go? To what extent we can work with them? To what extent we can't? One of the good things how to do it is obviously meditation. In meditation, our conscious mind, the solar mind, is getting calmed. That one is getting silenced, and our lunar mind can come to surface. It's a similar state to sleep, and it feels similar to sleep, because in sleep, our conscious solar mind is silenced. So, as I was mentioning in the show on meditation, I don't necessarily like or do call meditation as emptying of the mind, because vacuum does not exist. Emptiness does not exist. It's just a human concept, and it's basically just a calming of the solar mind, so the lunar mind can come to surface. So one of the things that's coming through this knowing yourself and solarization is perfecting yourself. We need to be masters of all elements. What does it mean? If you want to enter and start lunarizing your solar mind, your body has to match. Only alike can understand alike. Only something that's on the same level of something else can truly understand it and grasp it. If somebody does not have a mathematical school, they won't be able to understand some advanced mathematics. If somebody does not learn a certain language, they won't be able to understand a text in that language. So what does it mean? We have to match what we are trying to enter. And that's the hardest part of the whole development. And it's not something that most people want to do. And that's why the reason why not many people actually do follow this path. And that's why the reason why every other person that you can meet around is not a magician or hermetic or successful one. The reason is not because it would be somewhat obscure or it would be just for the chosen ones. It's for the people who actually choose it. So it's not for the chosen ones, it's for the choosing ones. The reason is that most people have, I would say, very simplistic ideas about what it is. And tend to complicate it when they should not, and may tend to simplify it when they should not either. So most people want to go in a spiritual development to be able to throw fireballs or get an unlimited amount of opposite or the same sex or unlimited amount of money, or again throw fireballs or just run around as a Harry Potter. But obviously if you tell them, well, no, not exactly, and what basically you have to do is that you now have to go and possibly even years, and maybe from point now on you have to spend in a deep introspection when you are absolutely ruthlessly looking at your worst mistakes and worst weaknesses, and you are trying to root them out and replace them with something better. And everybody will be like, yeah, that, you know what, I don't want to do that. So that's the true reason why every other person is just not running around with magic wands. It's because it requires this, and most people don't want to do it. And obviously the people who don't want to do it are not built for this at this lifetime. You can't force it with something. So that's actually the rule number one. We're going to go through several rules, or I would say principles of occult training. And that is, you can't force it on somebody who is not ready and who doesn't want to. The amount of resistance you're going to meet if you do so, it's enormous. So you can only help with it people who already want to follow that path or are already following it. So how does perfectioning is working? And I said working through elements. So we need to perfect ourselves so we can enter the perfect kingdom, or the halls of Medi, or how you want to call it. And in that sense, what we can do is not necessarily have to do it this particular way. Everybody can find their own way. You don't have to work through elements, but the elements are kind of making it easy and making it kind of, I would say, kind of systematic in a way. So what you can do, you can go and have a look in your astrological chart. You don't have to be able to, would say, calculate it. You can just go online and find it somewhere and get your astrological chart. When you're looking at your astrological chart, you will see, depends how much you actually can work with astrology. If you can't, I would recommend getting somebody who can. But if you actually go online, you can see where how your astrological chart looks like. And actually, in many cases, it just writes down in what star sign each of your planet is. So you obviously know that your sun is in a certain is in a certain sign at the moment you've been born. So that's why you are Leo. That's why you are Gemini. That's why you are Sagittarius. That's given by the position of the sun at the moment when you've been born. But obviously there are the planets as well. So if you want to do this, you are trying to find out where your other planets are. So if you're looking at your birth chart, it should say somewhere, or just ask somebody else astrology. And then each zodiac sign is assigned to an element. So Virgo is earth, Leo is fire, so on and so forth. So you're going to look where all of your planets are, and you're going to make a dot from towards each element when you find a planet in it. So if you, let's say, have a Mars in Leo, that's 1 point for fire. If you have Mercury in Gemini, Gemini is air, you have 1 point. for air. In case of Sun, Moon, and Mercury, because that's 3 very important planets, you do 2 dots instead of 1. And once you are done with all of the planets, you might have a Neptune in, I don't know, Pisces, so you do dot water. At the end of if you go through all the planets and you do all the dots in which zodiac sign, in which element they are, you will find out with 3 elements, or with 4 elements, and let's say something like this. Fire, 5 dots. Air, 3 dots. Water, 1 dot. Something around that. And that will tell you naturally what is your strongest element as a person. For some people, let's say if it's fire, they know they will be very ambitious, they will be sometimes maybe even ruthless, they will be very active, super active. For people who have like a lot of earth, they will have, let's say, problems with overstay in a situation, sometimes lack of motivation to go on. And also look at the element that you are missing. For people who are having very little water, very little water, they will have occasional lack of having hard time with compassion. For people who have too much of water, or like loads of water, they can be emotional. If they have, let's say, loads of water and fire and very little of earth and grounding, that means the person can get very, very agitated when it comes to emotions, because obviously water and fire without any ground, without any earth, that's just mess. So in that way, it kind of gives you a good overview, like where you are standing in terms of your personality and where your traits, what is like the inclinations you are going to have. And I would recommend in general to start with your the most active element. Usually, let's say when I was looking at my friend, you should be able to tell loads of that by just knowing yourself. But it's good to do the astrology chart. If you want to do something really fun, I would recommend to just write down on the paper, like kind of your expectations, like what you think it's going to be your strongest element, and what you think you are going to be like your weakest, and what do you think like how you're going to stand in it, and then actually go and count it according to your astrological chart. And I believe in loads of cases you will be very close. After some experience, I can already tell from, not with all of my friends, but I would say with some people, I can just look at it and say, yep, this is loads of air and loads of fire. This person has loads of very, like a strong, ambitious, revolutionary thoughts, and he seems to be overthinking a lot. There's definitely air, air and fire. So it's possible to tell by the nature of the person. And so once you kind of know your elemental balance or your elemental set, again, this is not necessary. You can just go and start working on yourself even without this, but this is just like a one way how to do it. Then you will kind of know where you are standing. I in general recommend starting with your strongest element, because that will make it easier to work through it. Because obviously if your strongest it's fire, then you will have eventually tendency to recklessness, or maybe being angry, or just being sometimes ruthless, or being too ambitious. So it's going to be traits that will be so visible, or inclinations that will be the strongest. It will make it easier for them to work with them, because the changes of those elements will be prominent within your nature, because that's your strongest element. So I would recommend kind of start working with your strongest one. But what you can do, and it's actually something I would definitely strongly recommend, is working with those elements within yourself with seasons. Seasons, as everything, is also connected. 4 seasons, 4 elements. So obviously winter would be connected with water, because when you have a snow, winter is very watery. The snow, the water can just hold on, can just stick to the ground, even in a frozen form, but it still kind of hangs around for months. It does not just disappear as it normally does. So obviously that's where winter is water. Also, if you look at the wheel, if you imagine a wheel of seasons, the water is obviously opposite to summer, which is fire. So the fire is opposite water. And during the winter, when it's snowing, the water just lingers around in the form of water, so in the form of ice or snow. So winter is water. Spring is air. Some people even say, "Oh, spring is in the air." Yeah, I've been saying it without actually knowing. But spring is connected with air. Summer, obviously, it's fire. During the summer, if you even have like a water somewhere on the ground, just immediately evaporates. Summer heat, obviously, that's summer is a fire. Autumn is earth. Obviously, again, it's opposite. Spring is opposite the air. And also, if the leaves are obviously falling down, everything is on the ground. Leaves are starting to have a brown, earthy color. We can even smell earth. Everything smells earthy during the autumn. So all the 4 seasons do follow the elemental balance, or the elements as well. So for making this exercise like really, really powerful, you can always dedicate each season of the year to perfecting yourself in one area. Kat wrote spring cleaning, opening windows. I can remember that. Yeah, obviously, like spring cleaning. So it's air. We're like airing out. Spring, air is connected with ideas and communication. We also think about, with spring, I'm having more ideas. Like, I'm so creative during the spring. The whole nature is creative, having new ideas. There are new flowers getting on a tree, new flowers being on a tree. It's a new idea. There is a new flowers growing. The whole nature is just coming up with new ideas about how to grow, what to grow. So spring is the most creative time of the year. So what you can do to make it really, really successful is you can connect it with season, as I mentioned. So let's say now we are entering winter, so water. So we will be working with positive and negative traits of water within ourselves, and we will try to spend the whole season on trying to perfecting them. So obviously, the water is connected with heart, love, compassion, emotions. So naturally, in Western countries, we have a Christmas. In the winter, the holidays of compassion, the holidays of love, the holidays. That's basically transformed pagan celebration. But okay, we understand Christmas as giving, caring, love, and that's obviously all emotions, and emotions are always connected to cups and water and love. So partially in winter especially, we have naturally the hard part of it, part of that is already over, but we can concentrate the whole winter of trying to let's say with emotions, maybe not being overly sensitive to certain things, trying to learning how to be compassionate, but sometimes detach ourselves from our emotions when in one way or another they are blocking us too much, or they are just being too much, because emotions can sometimes get just too much. So kind of working with that, finding the right balance with the emotions. If you are a tarot card reader, this winter season and the water and the emotions would definitely I would say relate to the Suit of Cups. So you can actually work with the Suit of Cups throughout the winter if you are a tarot card reader, and look into each card, look into each archetype, and trying to work with it, perfect it within yourself. Obviously, the spring, that would be time to work with air, new ideas. Air, sometimes the negative traits of air would be, let's say, problems with communication, or it can be jumping from one opinion to another. If somebody is changing opinions all the time, somebody is just having a hard time to stick to one idea. Air can be also lack of focus. Lack of, let's say, lack of a weak air element is lack of focus. We can also, let's say, it can be not having enough ideas. And so opposition to that, we were trying to develop the positive traits of air. And we can naturally just turn that into basically ongoing project that can go on long term. I know people who've been doing slightly similar system for their whole life, and it seems to be working better and better. And because naturally things work in cycles, even though it seems like you will be doing the same thing every year, actually you will discover that every year is going to be different. Same like tree, even though yes, it's obviously spring is coming and the tree is growing and it has apples, and during the winter it's just bare, nothing is happening. The next year the tree will go through the same process. That's true from the same 4 seasons, but it's going to be bigger, it's going to be stronger, it's going to be better, have more apples, it's going to have better apples, different. So it's not going to be the same each year, and you are going to grow and you're going to be getting perfected as exactly as the tree. And again, it's something you don't have to do by seasons, but the same way how people do ritual full moon, the same way you can just use the natural current of the year to literally just surf on that energy that's already out there. You kind of just using the vibes that are already around. We all know that depends obviously where are you on this planet, but seasons do feel differently. Depends where you're at. In some countries like UK, the differences between seasons are not that much, but in certain parts, let's say, of Europe or Central America, not central, like Central United States of America, sometimes you will have a very prominent seasons. So you know yourself that everything just feels different throughout the seasons. The energy air is different in autumn. The energy is completely different than it is in the summer. So in that sense, you can just surf on the energy that's already there, something that's already happening in such a big scale as a whole season. So that's a quite big energy current you can use for your advantage. And what's going to happen is that you will realize that loads of the stuff that you've been trying to do before and just was blocked, or there was negative energy around it, now will start to go smoothly. As you work on those 4 elements, as you're perfecting yourself, the energies and the energy currents within your body and within your own soul will start flowing naturally. And the natural state of things is balance, and natural state of things is abundance and balance. So the things in your body working properly, and everything is just anything your endeavors you're trying to do in love or in work are just going to go much smoother. So the work that you're going to put in it is definitely worth it, and it's not easy because it requires quite rigorous introspections, and nobody wants to look in the paper and say, oh yeah, I guess I'm, oh yeah, I think I'm overstaying, I think I'm really I think I really have anger issues, or I think I didn't really handle my emotions well, but obviously nobody wants to do that, but it's terrible. But that's the main reason why we actually do have to do that, because it's very important, and especially if somebody wants to be magician, if somebody wants to be hermetic, somebody wants to be mystic, it's something that's vitally important. One of the things that can kind of help on the situation, and that's kind of, I would say, energetical exercise, except for meditations and then just like the whole season wondering about one's own laziness or lack of focus. what you can do, you can take a very positive spin out of that exercise, and you can accumulate energetically the positive traits of the air or of the particular element. Just thinking about one positive quality that you want to awaken at yourself. So let's say with fire, you would like to be, healthily courageous, and definitely you want to just, have that courage. So you are going to think about, just going to go into meditation, and you are going to think about things or imagery or feelings that you have connected with the idea of courage. Naturally, you might, the images, you might just start imagining one image of maybe some courageous warrior, but naturally your brain usually just takes over, your lunar mind takes over, and it just keeps continue with images and ideas and thoughts that will kind of coming within that. I would just say just kind of keep it within the topic of a courage. And as you're imagining all of that, you can like squeeze that energy, you can channel that energy to in between your palms, and you can kind of like keep squeezing that courage energy in between your palms, and you can try to make ball, to kind of like make courage ball in your hands, channeling that energy, channeling those images, channeling those ideas in between your palms that you put slightly apart from each other. And once you have this ball amongst, in between your hands, you can just stretch out your hands, and with the hands, as you're stretching out your hands, you're stretching out the ball of courage, and you're stretching it out until you create some sort of like an egg shape or sphere shape that you will be sitting in, or that you just be either in lotus position or sitting on a chair, wherever you are, and you just kind of lock yourself in that energy. So and then you can meditate within that ball of energy. You can do improving focus like that. You can do creativity, you can have new ideas, you can have ambition, you can have compassion, you can have just make a bubble of love energy, whatever you need that you feel like in your life. You don't have to just introspect and look at it, but you can do all sorts of exercises like that. Or what you can do, you can again just make the energy ball in between your hands. And let's say now it's winter, so you want to develop compassion. So you're just going to think about compassion, really just channel images in between your hands, make energy ball out of compassion, and you can get a glass of water. Do not use anything else than water, just water. And you just squeeze the energy into the glass of water, in that water, and then you drink it. That's within you. So you can work with it as you see energetically. You don't have to just like think about it. And the best results usually have if you combine some sort of energetical exercises, like let's say like making the egg out of compassion, or making the egg out of soak it in while being inside of it, or by drinking a pure water that is charged with this particular energy. So the energy exercises are actually a great companion to the exercises that will be purely mental or purely astral. So the physical ones are usually helping. So you can just like turn every season like this, and every season you can just keep perfecting yourself, and really being your own designing yourself the way that you always wanted to be. If you always wanted to be funny, ambitious, and just fabulous, then what's stopping you? You can just be that. If you always wanted to be smart and knowledgeable and having all of those great ideas, if you always wanted to be compassionate, if you always felt like you always wanted to be maybe less ambitious, or always wanted to be more compassionate, or you feel like you always wanted to be somebody who is more grounded, you always want that, just be your own design. You don't have to be afraid. perfect yourself, make the best version out of yourself that you always are. Every day, if you will just make yourself better and better and perfect yourself and just turning in yourself into the best version of yourself, you're just going to be happier and happier. That doesn't mean that in some one way or another we are imperfect the way that we are, but just striving for the best, striving for the perfection, striving for the amazing balance of perfection, it's something that will always bring results, and will, as a side effect, except for just having smoother life, is going to also develop resistance to stress, resistance to, I would say, building up of wrong patterns, including addictions, and also including, let's say, the tendencies to insist on picking a wrong partner. So that's all of those things that naturally go away with those exercises. Especially, it does help with addictions. I'm not a doctor, so I can't guarantee it, but I do believe this is something that, if combined, let's say, with other things, can actually help with addictions. So that's kind of like this whole year exercise. That's kind of like a nice thing, what to incorporate in your life as, I would say, occult or metaphysical practice. But this is obviously something that you can do for the rest of your life. No matter where you've been in life, this is something you can still work on. But what this will trigger, actually this will happen if you're doing it for a substantial amount of time. Basically, what will start to happen as a result of this exercise is I would say the stage 2 of the 2 stages. When I said the first one is solarization of the lunar mind and perfection of yourself, and the second step is the lunarization of the solar mind. That means that it's starting to work the opposite direction. So first we've been starting to be aware of our lunar mind and lunar processes and our own self, and now the outside, the macrocosm, the divine providence, the energies that are all around are starting to affect us. They're starting to talk to us back. They're starting to be bring to our solar mind. So that means our psychic senses will start to open, and we are starting to understand world in a new way, which is going to be vertical. What does it mean? In regular mind, if somebody sees a certain, let's say, object, let's say a circle. If we think about things in a horizontal position, that means in the position of material world. If I see circle on a paper, I will look at it and will think about maybe a circle I saw later that day being drawn on the pavement, or I will be thinking about a circle in a logo. So I'm kind of still having my mind horizontally thinking, looking left and right and left, where I can see other circles. As I'm only looking around horizontally, only in my material world, only in my experiences, only in my solar mind. What is there? Where are the circles I can see? When we are going into second stage of the training, of the lunarization, we are now starting to not just look left and right, but we are starting to looking up and down, and that's the vertical. So if you see the circle, now we're going to start looking at the circle, and we're looking up and down. So if you look up and thinking about circle, we are going to look at the circle, and we are going to see the perfection of it. That the circle is a perfect shape, that it's the sign of a perfect divine, perfect divinity and unity. If you look down on the circle, we are going to see the cycles of seasons. So that you can see it as a difference. Instead of looking left and right, to find connections or to find correspondences, we are starting to looking up and down, and that's where we are finally getting on the vertical axis of the magical development. So if you see the symbol of a cross, let's say in esoteric tradition, that means the person is existing on the line himself or her, because he's balanced, he's perfected, he is getting where the two lines cross, and he starts to look up and down and ascend on the vertical axis of that cross. So that's how you can understand, let's say, how the symbol of cross can work in an esoteric tradition, or how is it understand that particular way. And obviously once you're on the vertical axis and you're starting to look for correspondences between things vertically, from looking up, from down, that's the moment when you are becoming the divine human, or the Hermes Trismegistus person, who is the God's creation, the person that is returning to its full potential as a smaller miniature version of a divine consciousness in material body, and starting to have that abilities or information or knowledge of that stage. So how long this whole development can take? It's a good question. Eventually lifetimes. Depends on the person. I made a show earlier this year, I think a few months ago, and that one was called The Challenges of a Metaphysical Development. So obviously the path is not that straightforward as I just describe it. In the show I'm more talking about the Avenger blunders or blockages that one person can would say encounter. But I would say in general the biggest encounter or the biggest challenge the person can make is going to be his own resistance and his own pride. That's usually two very difficult things to overcome. With blockages and our own limitations is something that can be overdone and can be, I would say, overcame. Pride is something that is hard to overcome, and once somebody got into that proudful stage, proudful moment, it's going to be very, 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 very hard to get back out of it. And that's the reason why, let's say, Rosicrucians are considering the pride as one of the highest sin, because if you are greedy, okay, there is things that can be done about it. If you are I don't know, if you are selfish, okay, maybe there can be something about it. But if somebody is literally prideful and have too much of a pride to the point when it's really unhealthy, it's really hard to convince that person that he needs to work on himself, because the pride is telling you that you are amazing, you're perfect as you are, everything is great and up to 10, and you don't have to do anything. And if you don't have to do anything, you won't do anything and you won't get anywhere. So that's why pride is seen as the highest sin in Rosicrucian tradition. So now we have 15 minutes left, so I'm going to kind of like talking, but I would like to also answer some questions. If everybody has any questions about the topic, please go on paraxradionetwork.com if you're listening to the show live, and please don't hesitate to ask me some question in the chat room where I am, where I'm sitting, and I'm going to answer those questions. On air. In case you just got to this show and you would like to listen it to the beginning, it's going to be in the show archive, which is going to be on the Mixcloud, where you can find it under Spiritual Alchemy on www.thelunarlodge.com, or you can go to the show section on Parax Radio, and that's where you can find the archive. So if you're really looking for it, I'm sure you will find it on paraxradionetwork.com website or somewhere else. And I'm going to have the chat. So Ceiling Kid is writing, I have the two big elements in my chart, water and fire. kind of cancel each other. If you have water and fire, they are definitely going to cancel each other, but also that means that you can definitely maybe there's a good chance. I will have to see the rest of the chart, especially how much you have water, earth. If you have not much of earth, that means suggesting that you will be you can get ambitious. You can get very ambitious and emotional about certain course and direction. So if you are, let's say, ambitious about becoming, I don't know, the best kid in the group in, I don't know, basketball, then you can get really emotional about it. Like, I want to get. Especially if you have those two, could be definitely good balancing with earth. But if you do have already strong earth, then it's going to be fine. Water and fire is definitely interesting combination. But can get quite explosive sometimes, especially when there is lack of earth or very little earth. Sayona's writing, mine is air, not to be confused with airhead, lol. Well, air usually is suggesting that the person has loads of ideas, but again, depends how, let's say, what earth is, how much earth there is in the chart. If there is air and earth, that's a good combination, suggesting the person will be nicely grounded, sticking to their opinions. But if there's, let's say, very little fire, it's suggesting the person will have lack of ambition or having a hard time for ambition to actually push those ideas forward. So this usually will tell you, usually the elemental balance in your chart will usually tell you that, I would say, where you can have like a problems, or when you can have what can be the struggle, what's something that you need to bring in. Doesn't mean you can't bring in, and obviously you can bring in whatever you want. But it will kind of give you like a nice overview, like where to start, or what might be the something you can start with. Let's say with me, I personally have in a chart very strong earth and such as be ambitious. I can, with loads of earth, to eventually overstay in a situation, and really fiery, insist on overstaying in the situation, which is absolutely correct. Or it can also say that out of ambition, the results that I have very little water. So sometimes I can, when I'm going on my earth fire journey, conquest, obviously conquering, conquest, that's what you can expect from somebody with loads of earth and fire. I have very little water, so I can just not necessarily be non-emotional, kind of lack compassion when I'm like a tank, just like going from point A to point B. So obviously for me, winter is ideal. I can work on compassion. I kind of go and develop that, because let's say in my chart, water is the weakest element I have. So obviously I know that winter is going to be important, and it's going to be time I'm going to actually try to develop more this passive compassion, I would say element of water. So obviously, like, not going to tell you nice things about yourself only. It's going to tell you things you have to look at, and things that are your strong sides. And obviously, you know, that it's a good, the astrological chart is a good starting point, but you don't have to do that. You can just make a chart when you just write each element, and then you can just write down what you think is your best abilities, or what you think is your worst qualities, and you can just write a list and just assign each of the qualities to element which you kind of feel where is it going. So let's say if I would do that, I would possibly come up with the same solution. I would definitely say that I'm courageous and I'm ambitious. So obviously that's positive qualities of fire, but I'm also tend to be reckless, and I tend to be rude, and I just tend to be terrible sometimes, which is negative qualities of fire. And obviously I tend to overstay, so that's negative qualities of earth. So even if I would do it like this particular way, like when I was just like writing down my qualities and good ones and bad ones and just kind of delegate it into columns, I'm sure you can just come up with very similar, actually, very similar set of qualities that you would do if you would do it through the astrological chart. So definitely you can just start doing it. You can just start with winter, because now, obviously, as I said, this is times of and also can be a good time to kind of deal with old emotions, some sort of like a lingering emotions that would be just better for everybody if they would be gone. So that's something that also you can work through and through the time. Or you can just also, like, again, you can surf on the energetic wave of Christmas, compassion, love, forgive. Have to be expansive. It can be, it can be even like handmade. That's something that you put some effort in, and something that's just like nice thing to do. You can just, it doesn't have to be even things that you have to necessarily buy or make. You can just, I don't know, take a granny do. And through working all of those elements, you're going to become the master of all elements, and that's where you ultimately want to be, and that's the position where you want. I'm sometimes feeling, and that's kind of a tendency currently, that people in positive information, positive about everything themselves. They only want to hear that they're awesome, and they never want to hear anything that's bad. They don't want to hear it. And it seems like, I would say, maybe it is encouraging in a way, but in the same way, it's making us extremely weak to our own, I would say, not necessarily issues, but to our own weaknesses. It makes us extremely weak, because if we are not working on them, if we are not aware of them, they are getting power over us. So we are becoming weaker to it than ever, and it's making them even harder to eventually go and try to root it out, or just, I would say, exchange it for the positive ones. Well, we don't necessarily have to like go and try to root out greed. That's actually a very hard thing to do by just like spending your money. But we can instead try to develop the opposite quality to that. So if we know, let's say, that our bad quality is greed, then we start to develop generosity. If I know that our bad quality is maybe the fact that we are changing opinions, we have too much air, changing one opinion from the one, being flaky, not being, having hard time to be at a certain time, at a certain space. If we have something like that, we will start to develop the opposite, positive direction. For somebody who is reckless, is going to be patience. For somebody who is having a hard time to focus, is going to be focus. For somebody who is having a hard time to be compassionate, it's going to be compassion. So just not being afraid of actually looking at your strong side and your weak side. Not being afraid of looking at it and say, oh yeah, I'm reckless. Yeah, I am. Yeah, cool. Oh, god damn it. True. Okay, well, I can do with it. That makes you really, really strong. Even just the ability to be able to just openly do introspection, openly look, and absolutely honestly, you don't have to show it to anybody, just looking at yourself on your strong sides and on your weak sides with honesty with yourself. That's already development of honesty, and that's a positive quality of fire. So just by that, you're already having 1 point. And as always, I'm terrible. But that's why you hate me so much. Love me so much. So this is pretty much what I had today for the show. I wanted to talk about the perfecting of yourself, something I wanted to talk in the part 1 of this show that I aired last week, but because I was just talking about so much other stuff that is fairly important for this whole subject. I just had to kind of delegate the whole thing into this part 2, when I kind of wanted to expand on that and kind of expand what it actually means and how it can be worked and how you can connect it with seasons and how you can just turn yourself into your own design. So I would like to close this show with some food for thought, and that is that we usually hear all around ourselves, "Oh no, be yourself, be authentic." But the question is, what the hell is authentic? Who is authentic human and what it isn't? What is authentic me and what is not authentic me? What is half authentic me? How can I not be authentic? The only thing how you can truly be authentic, and the only way how you can truly be yourself, is when you create yourself. If you design yourself. If you are your own design, you are truly yourself. If you're your own manifestation of your own ideas and your own wishes. And if that means a pink wig and a whole pink outfit and chihuahua, be it. If that means having absolutely regular clothing, not wearing makeup and just wearing ponytails, be it. Be your own design. Design yourself and design the most perfect version of yourself that you can. So this is the end of the show today. With leaving you with the thought that creating the best possible version of yourself, you are basically creating a perfect version of a god. So thank you so much for you listening. I have a few interesting guests I'm going to have in upcoming few weeks, including a Christmas special on heretics, which I think is going to be fun. So thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you so much.